welcome to the second update and probably the last update until the final reveal of the Polar Lights Candies and Hughes Barracuda funny car. Been pretty busy with the car. Everything it's done for all practical purposes, I guess. Everything is done except for everything below the body is done. Let's put it that way. Of course, I showed you the body in the first video. The only thing I have left to do is everything body, which would be decals, interior body panels, and glass windows, and one final coat of clear after I get the decals on. So it's pretty much done, and so we'll take a look at it and see what we got. Let me adjust here just a little bit. I may have to adjust on this more. My camera hates to zoom. There it is. It turned out very well, I thought. I like it. It's for a Polar Lights kit. It didn't give me a whole lot of guff. Just a couple of fit issues here and there. As I said, I think in the first video, the key to these things is getting the frame, and the key to any of them, the Revell, Monogram, MPC, any of them, is getting your frame square. If you start out with a crooked frame, it's a domino effect. And then when you finally get everything, even if you don't notice it when you're building, and when you get done, and you get the wheels on the car, and you get ready to get the body on, and you've got the car, doing that rocking from corner to corner. So you can save yourself a lot of grief by just taking your time, working slow to get the frame squared up. So anyhow, I'm not going to go into any of the colors on the engine. You know what I did there with the Tamiya smoke on the valve covers and all that. The blowers, dull coat, front, rear, and the blower itself. Touch on the detail, the fuel line, oil, and water line detail just a little bit. What I used for the detail lines in this one was, and I did this for a reason for the new guys, that you see a lot of these guys on here that, and I'm one of them, that buy a lot of aftermarket stuff, braided line, fittings, anodized fittings, this, that, and the other, fuel blocks, this, that, and the other. You don't have to do that. You don't have to buy, a set of 6 or 8 anodized fittings for $9 or $10 or whatever. There are other things out there. And what I used here for the fuel line, going to the fuel block and return, and water line, I took this tank and used it as a water water tank, and ran direct water into each of the heads. And I don't know, I'm not even going to try to zoom in any closer because my camera will not, when it zooms in, it just blurs terribly. Maybe I can just, let me see if it's going to act halfway decent. And that would be no. No, it's not going to. I didn't think it would. Back out just a little. Okay, well, I think that's about as good as we're going to get it, and it's going to pulsate a little bit there. Well, we'll just try to work with that best we can. I wanted you to see a little bit of, back out just a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Anyhow, I used the smaller of the two sizes of bead stringing wire. What I used was for the water lines and the fuel line up here. And before I go any further, let me talk about scale real quick. I did the fittings coming out of the fuel tanks I did those in the front of the tank for a reason. I know it's not, you're going to say, well, that's not accurate. You know, the fuel tanks, most of the moon tanks have them in the top. Well, that's true. But I was concerned about how much of loop I was going to get over the top and how much that was going to interfere with the body panels when I dropped the car body down on it. So I went out the front to try to keep that down as low as I could get it, which meant that the fittings I could use that limited me on the size of the fittings, which in turn limited me on the size of the braided or the bead stringing wire. I used 0.018 inch bead stringing wire for this. The fuel line going to the injector and then back into the fuel tank is 0.024 inch. So 24 hundredths of an inch size for the fuel line there, and 0.018 inch for the fuel line going to the block and returning through the injector and then back to the fuel tank. So also did the oil lines from the oil filters, and then let me see if I can pick this up without knocking everything loose. You can see I've got my fittings there, and my anodized fittings are number 2, and I'll show you those, so they're right here, I believe. Number 2 crimp tubes, which are number 1, number 2 crimp tubes, and number 1 and number 0 crimp beads. The crimp beads are for your anodized fittings, or would replicate your hex fittings. The tubes would be just the body of the fitting as it comes out of the hose, or the braided line, or whatever you're using. And those are also made by Beadline. I would attempt to dump one of these out, but knowing my luck, they'll all come out at one time. I got these at Michael's. Number 1 and number 2 are about as far as crimp tubes are going to be the size you'll probably need the most. Number 0 crimp beads are what you would use for your hex fittings. If you go up any larger, which is what I did here at the top of the injector pump, I used that here only because I had to use a number 2 crimp tube because of the piece that came out of the top of the injector pump, the molded plastic. I could have cut it off, but even then, if I cut it off and then drilled into it, it would still be awfully small to try to put a number 2 crimp tube up on top. I mean, a number 1 crimp tube up on top, and then have the fuel line look like it was in scale. Now the water lines are very small, and probably way too small, or at least too small. Maybe not way too small, but limited space, caused me to have to use those smaller pieces of beading wire. And actually, I'd rather be, if you're going to be out of scale a little bit, I think myself personally, it looks better on a model of this scale to be out of scale on the small side. To be out of scale on the large size on a 1/25th scale model, to me looks terrible. I'd rather, and you may think this looks terrible, but I think it's closer to being what looks natural. If you're going to blow this up to a 1-to-1 car, I believe this looks, closer to what would be accurate. So, and you may not agree with that, and that's, perfectly, within your right to feel that way, but I just think it looks better if you're going to be out of scale to be on the small side. So, anyway, I made a piece of made a fuel block out of just a piece of square stock. And let me tell you, drilling 2 holes in something that small was fun, to say the least. So anyway, that's it's got 2 number 1 crimp tubes, 2 number 0 beading crimp beads. The fan belt with the Polar Lights funny cars, at least this one, and I think I talked to Chris, my pal Chris at Classic Plastic, they give you, in the funny car kits, they give you the pulleys and the belt are separate. So you have three pulleys that you glue on, and then they send you a plastic rubber belt or vinyl, whatever you want to call it. It's vinyl, I think. Mine was toast. It was not worth, the time it took them to make it. It was cut. It was twisted. I couldn't have, if I attempted to stretch it, it would have broke. So I just threw it in the trash can, and I used I just got a black rubber band that I had here, and it actually was perfect, the perfect width for the pulleys, and also flat black, and also has a little texture. So I really got lucky, and it's cut it up and sized it, and pulled it up over put enough tension on it to where it doesn't look like it's slack in it, and put some Gorilla Glue on the cut, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little seam right there. I put it on the bottom where it wouldn't be noticed, and I think it looks 10 times better than the belt they sent me with. So, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is just very simple interior. A seat, seat belt. Went over everything in the driver's compartment with a black wash. Went over the seat belt to kind of give it a kind of a weathered up look. Also did that on all the suspension parts that I had already done in dull coat and aluminum plate metallizer. Went over that with Create Effects black wash, diluted it down in some places, and in other places I left it full strength just to give the metal different metal tones. And I think you may not be able to tell it here, but like where I went over the blower and the blower scoop front and rear, I think it really changed up the tone of the metal where it's sitting right beside the injector hat that has aluminum plate that's been polished out and sealed with metallizer sealer. And I did use a lot of the metallizers on this one. There's stainless steel metallizers on the oil pan. The tanks are aluminum plate polished out and sealed. The engine front, which you really can't see, the stainless steel metalizer. I even went over the fuel lines and all my braided line with a diluted black wash, just to give it that look of a car that's been ran down the track a few times. It's got some soot on it from the nitro smoke when they do their burnouts and when they go down the track, just to kind of give it a little realism. So there's the other side. I did the exhaust in craft acrylic graphite, just to make it look like that the pipes had faded a little bit. They weren't just perfectly flat black. The wheels are aluminum plate, polished and sealed with metallizer sealer. And that's it, pretty much. I like the way it came out. I think it looks pretty good. You can form your own opinion one way or the other. And like I said, all I have left to do is the body panels on the inside, and I'll be done. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the look, and until I see you next time, or talk to you next time, we will have a finished model, hopefully, the next time I talk to you. And I'll be doing probably in the next 2 or 3 days, even if I'm not through with the car, I'm going to do a little show you what I use for some of these to replace some of these aftermarket braided line, some of the crimp tubes, get them out and show them to you. Or today I just didn't have the time to get it all out and go through it, and let you take a look at what you can get, what's available out there, the 3 or 4 different kinds of braided line that I use, along with the aftermarket stuff that I get from the model companies and the Chip and Lisa and Chevy Cheeseburger at Extreme Scale Detail. So, having said that, I'll call this one finished. Until I talk to you again, take care of one another, keep building, see you soon.
sun ain't shining down